We now have our final session chaired by Dr. Zoe, and we have three presenters, Mir Tanzim Nur Angkur, Mr. Sibbir Ahmad, and Mr. Towhid Iqram Mahmood.
Hello, everyone. Round of applause to everyone. Yes, in the room. Yes, you're smiling. Yes, we have really good food at the end of the session. Yes, looking forward to it. Yes, I'm really excited for this session. I brand myself as a macroeconomist, but I also do macro labor. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the presentations and the questions. So please, yes, let's stay engaged. Last mile. Okay, so we have three papers. One on remittance, one on labor market discrimination, and the last one is on safety with the Rana Plaza disaster, which I recently learned we had the anniversary last month, so it's very timely. Okay, so without further ado, the first paper by Mir Tanzim Nur Angkur, yes, the Economics of Remittance Receipts in a Refugee Camp, the Case of Rohingyas in Bangladesh. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. So this is one of the papers I'm doing for my PhD defense dissertations. I'm Mir Angkur. I'm PhD candidate in applied economics at Western Michigan University. So the title of my paper is basically the Economics of Remittance Receipts in a Refugee Camp, the Case of Rohingyas in Bangladesh. So the literature on remittance and migration previously focused more on the economic migrants. There are a few papers that have, focused on displaced populations just like Rohingyas. But recently, a paper by Vargas Silva, who worked on displaced population, his literature suggests that displaced people also receive remittance and also they send remittances. So this study differs because the Rohingya are already migrants. They have to leave their own country and they are living in Bangladesh, and they're receiving remittances from their friends and relatives who are also displaced from Myanmar. And the people who are sending remittance are mostly from outside of Myanmar, Malaysia, India, United Arab Emirates, and as well as in Saudi Arabia. So the main focus is on Rohingyas. So I hope all of you know who are Rohingyas, but still I just want to give you a touch on who are Rohingyas. They are basically the Muslim ethnic minority people of Myanmar. They used to live in the Rakhine state, which is shown in the the red part of Myanmar. There have been exodus of people coming from Myanmar because of there has been systematic attacks on them by the Myanmar government. So the latest exodus took place in 2017, where 1 million people had to leave their state, and now they're living in Cox's Bazar, which is shown as the orange part, which is part of Bangladesh, which is the southern part of Bangladesh, basically. So the motivation and contributions, basically, I've already stated that the displaced population, there's few papers that have addressed this issue, remittance. And in a report by UNHCR, they stated that the Rohingyas were living in these refugee camps. Their most concern is livelihoods and education of their children. And through this paper, I want to emphasize that remittance could prove to be a survival strategy for them, since they're living in camp with limited economic resources and they're also financially constrained. So through this paper, I want to address the following questions. The first question is how remittance impact the livelihood strategies of Rohingyas living in camps. In addition to that, I want to see how remittance impact the host community who are living just outside the camps in the neighboring districts, and as well as the Rohingyas. And this is important because the political scenario suggests that the Rohingyas are not likely to go back to Myanmar anytime soon. So briefly touching on the literature review, so I've just divided into two parts: economic migrants. There has been a lot of papers, tons of papers actually, which has seen the effect of remittance on household income activities. As far as the Rohingya refugees are concerned, there has been focus group discussions and not necessarily causal impact studies that have been done. So I'm the first paper that is trying to address the causal impact of remittance on livelihood strategies. So as far as the methodology is concerned, I'm relying on the first wave of Cox's Bazar panel survey, although it's written panel, but the thing is that I had to rely on the first wave, the first round that took place in 2019. And this is a survey that is being done in cooperation by Yale Macmillan Center. They exclusively done research on forced migration, forced displacement, and refugees, and also in cooperation with the World Bank, Gender and Adolescent Global Evidence Program. So this survey focuses on two representative groups in New York Cox's Bazar. The one I already told is the host community and the Rohingyas. So in the data set, I do have information about 5,011 households. Out of these, 2,511 belongs to the host community and 2,500 households belong to the Rohingyas. So for the empirical strategy, I consider the following regressions where my dependent variable is livelihood options. And the livelihood options, I have taken 4: labor earnings, asset earnings, farm earnings, and business earnings. And the independent variable is remittances. So I'll be using the linear probability model because my dependent variable is a binary one. It has 4 options. I will discuss a bit later. And since most literature on remittance found that there is probability of indigeneity issues, so in order to tackle that, I have used instrumental variable. For the analysis, I'm taking an instrument which I termed as family network connections. Basically, this relates to households who have family members, immediate family members who are working outside or studying abroad within Bangladesh or outside Bangladesh. So this is basically the first stage where I'm regressing the remittance on other exogenous variables of my original model. By regressing this, I get the predicted value of remittance. Then I'm using it on my second stage where my dependent variable is livelihood options. So from this second equation, the estimates I'll be getting will be unbiased parameters. So facts on remittances, as you can see on the top, figure 2 shows the share of households who were receiving remittances. So in my sample, out of 5,011 households, 22% almost receiving remittances in the last 1 year. Out of these 2,500 Rohingya households, almost 19% receive remittances, and among the host, almost 25% receive remittances. And the share of remittances on the right, figure 3 shows from where they're getting remittances. As you can see, the most are getting within Bangladesh. That means this is domestic remittances, but also a significant part is coming from India, Saudi Arabia, and other parts of the world. For the Rohingyas are concerned, they also receive remittances from within Bangladesh, and a significant is coming from Saudi Arabia and India. So for the livelihood strategies on the figure 6, you can see for the host community, most of the earnings are coming from wage, labor earnings, almost 70% are coming from there. As you can see, the total is not 100% because households may have multiple sources of income earnings. So that's why you see if you total them, it will be more than 100%. For the case of Rohingyas, most of them households have reported that they have earned income through wages. A little bit come from farm earnings, and a small amount comes from asset earnings. For the variables, as I've already stated, I'm looking for the livelihood options. So I've taken 4 earnings: labor earnings, asset earnings, farm earnings, and business earnings. And the main indicated variable is remittances, which is also a dummy variable. It shows if the household received remittance in the last 1 year or so. This is also a dummy variable. As most of the remittance literature stated that the remittance decisions or the decision to migrate, depends on household head characteristics as well as the family structure. So the bottom variables are showing the age of the households, the household head's education, if the household had a male household or not, and the family structure variables, family size, and dependent household members. So these are the summary statistics. I have also put the mean difference just to show that the characteristics of host people and the Rohingyas are almost similar, apart from the number of dependent members as well as the household head religious education, but the rest variables do not have a significant difference between them. So the table, in this table, what I'm trying to show the effect of remittance on labor earnings as well as asset earnings. If you see the first column, it shows the LPM model, and the second and third column shows the 2SLS model, where I'm trying to see the effect of remittance on labor earnings for the Rohingya refugees. If you see third column 1B, we see that if the households receive remittances, they're more likely to engage in wage employment. They earn more compared to those households who receive remittances. As far as the asset earnings is concerned, column 6, which is 4B, shows that it is positive but not significant for the Rohingyas, obviously. In this table, I'm putting the third option, which is farm earnings in first column. You can see it shows the LPM estimates, but since there is indigeneity issue, so I'm more focusing on the 2SLS. Although the remittance hat shows positive, but it is not significant. Same case for the case of business earnings. Those who have received remittances, they have a positive but not significant effect on business earnings. For the host community, if you see third column, which shows the effect of remittance on labor earnings, just like the Rohingyas, it shows that among the host households, those who receive remittances, they have highly like chance to earn labor wages. And for the asset earnings are concerned, the households who receive remittances are more likely to earn through asset earnings, and it is significant. So in this table, I'm focusing on the farm earnings, but the effect of remittance on farm earnings is positive but not significant. For the business earnings among the host community, those who receive remittances, they're likely to participate, and they're likely to receive less money in the form of business earnings, but this is not significant. So conclusion and policy recommendation, the results of my paper suggest that remittance do impact the host and the Rohingyas differently. And through this paper, I can put forward these arguments that since they are financially constrained, so remittance could be a survival strategy for these Rohingyas. And the policy implication as concerned, the host government or the organization who are working in Rohingya camps tend to build up, cheap communications for these Rohingyas to communicate with their relatives abroad so that they can receive the remittance safely and reliably and obviously in a fast way. So thank you for listening to my presentations. I'm open for questions.
Yes. Do we have questions from the audience? Go ahead.
Hi, so really interesting question, but I had kind of two comments. So one is I'm thinking a little bit about the exclusion restriction of your IV, because family networks, we're talking about the effect of remittance running through family networks, but family networks could also directly affect livelihood. So I'm a little concerned about whether the exclusion restriction is being met necessarily in this context. So something to kind of think a little bit about. The other thing is your F stats from your first stage look a little bit on the lower side. So that's also something to kind of think about.
Okay, thank you. So as far as the IV is concerned, so it's very difficult to get an IV. So first of all, and for these Rohingyas, it is extremely difficult. So what you have stated is correct. If you see, so if you see here, so first of all, I need to define what we mean by family network. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that if in a household, if there are family members who are working abroad, right? If they're studying maybe, right? So they are likely to send remittances. So that is correlated with my endogenous variable is remittance. But the thing is that they're living abroad doesn't, influence the choice of, earnings, basically. They're living in, in a country, right? So I'm talking about the foreign people who are living abroad. So they help to send remittances, but there's, less chance that it could affect their, household earnings. And okay, and the thing what you have said is correct. Is basically, if you see here, the IV which I took, it's positive, but the statistics is almost 7. So in rule of thumb is there in econometrics that it should be around 12. More than 12 will be good to to validate the instrument. For the host community, it's way above 12. So it works for them, basically.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
So, very good presentation, and you looked at the different aspects. So remittance, the Rohingya communities, so they are receiving remittance using the formal channel or informal channel?
That is a good question. So actually in the data set, there is nothing, that kind of information is not given there. It simply states that whether you have received remittance in the last 12 months or so. So there's yes or no. And from which country you have received. But there's nothing related to, is it a formal channel or informal channel? But I feel like it's informal. I believe it's, from my experience, I can say it's informal.
Other questions? I actually have a comment myself. So we looked at the UNHCR survey, one of the surveys of the Cox's Bazar region, but it's not exactly the same survey you're looking at. I think during COVID, there was a question on whether you had difficulty withdrawing money, withdrawing cash. That's a cash transfer survey, and a lot of people said they did. So maybe if they did receive remittance in the formal channel, that would actually make it harder for them to get the money. With the informal channel, it could actually, I guess, make it easier for them to actually receive and use that money.
Yeah, so the data is 2019, so it's before the COVID, but what you have stated is correct. Because of during the COVID, the formal channels has been hard hit, right? So, yeah.
Any other questions? Then let's move on. Second speaker, Mr. Sibbir Ahmad. Yes, labor market discrimination in Bangladesh, experimental evidence from the job market of college graduates. Discrimination is a big topic now.
Yeah.
Click here.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Sibbir Ahmad. I'm a fourth-year PhD student at Michigan State University. So I'm going to talk about labor market discrimination in Bangladesh and experimental evidence from the job market of college graduates. My co-authors are Dr. Songqing, Veronique Theriault from Michigan State University, and Dr. Klaus Deininger from World Bank. The labor market discrimination arises when a particular group experiences unequal treatment, like different groups based on their race, religion, national origin, ethnicity, gender, and so on, different identities or background. So it has long-lasting impacts, like social and economic impacts, like poverty, unemployment, intergenerational transmission of poverty, social exclusion, and it's sometimes like it causes the underutilization of human capital and lack of diversity in the workplace and so on. It has some impacts, as you all know. In this study, we focus on the very first stage of hiring or recruitment, like primary selection process. So our outcome variable is basically the callback. I'm going onto that. So motivation behind this study is Bangladesh is by and large a country of homogeneous population in terms of ethnicity, race, religion, language. However, there are different streams of high school education in Bangladesh. General high school, English medium high school, Islamic high school, or Aliyah Madrasa, informal Islamic high school, vocational high school. Lots of streams are there. So we are focusing here two different streams, major two streams, general high school, Bangla medium, and Aliyah Madrasa, which is Islamic high school. And job market in Bangladesh is very competitive. Women labor force participation for last 2-3 decades are impressive. Average job search period for college graduates is around 3 years, and BIDS studies, Murshid et al. Shows that college graduate unemployment among college graduates is 38%, which is pretty higher than the national average. There is a growing perception of labor market discrimination based on gender discrimination. There are a lot of studies on gender discrimination in Bangladesh, but there is a growing perception that candidates are facing differential treatment based on their high school background, their religious attire preferences. So as we are talking about the high school, different streams of high school, these major two streams are general high school and madrasa, which is like Islamic high school. Formal is a government approved high school education system. So after 12th grade, they all can go to the university and study whatever major they prefer. So the research question here, we are looking into, does labor market discrimination exist in Bangladesh based on candidates' high school background, religious attire preference, and gender? And if yes, what's the extent of the discrimination, and how does it vary across industries? I don't want to go all of these, but there are a lot of studies on discrimination. Barton and Molanathan did a seminal paper on it here on racial discrimination, African American sounding and white sounding names, impact on callback. Avijit Banerjee and co-authors did one in India, Delhi, based on religion and caste. And there are other studies. Those are, I'm referring those correspondence or audit studies. Audit studies is like a objective way to unearth discrimination that is difficult to study otherwise. Audit studies are like testing discrimination at the initial stage of the recruitment. So the contribution of these studies, this is the first experimental study investigating labor market discrimination based on high school background, because high school degrees are not an issue in Europe or American setting, because if someone have a college degree, they don't even mention high school degrees in their resumes. But in Bangladesh, candidates have to mention all of their high school degrees, and they have to put their photos in the resumes, so like one can easily identify which high school background they come from. So this is the first study investigating discrimination based on high school background, and this is the first one in Bangladesh, such experimental study to investigate discrimination. Other studies, those like focus on discrimination, mainly on gender discrimination, but those are not based on experiment. Those are like other non-experimental method they used. And very few studies use photographs, because in Western setting, resumes doesn't have a photograph, so they cannot like test discrimination based on a photograph. So we have that opportunity since Bangladesh has this provision to use photograph in the resumes. I just want to mention here like how we test that, define the discrimination. So the T is the callback treatment. So callback depends on like if I'm an employer, so I will call back those candidates like whom I think they have like more productive capacities, or like based on individuals' productivity. So productivity is a function of like individuals' observable and unobservable characteristics and farm characteristics, which is P here, and we include the identity R. So based on identity and the productivity, one can have callbacks for interview or written test. So we define discrimination if the callbacks are not equal based on identities, like are equal to 1 or 0, which might be high school background, might be gender or religious attire preferences. I did two models. Like first one, just taking dummies of high school attire and gender, and another one is separating them into 8 groups based on high school, gender, and attire. Here's the design of the experiment. So we created 8 randomized fictitious resumes. As you see in this figure, so out of 8 total resumes, 4 from general high school, 4 from madrasa high school background, and out of 4, 2 male and 2 female, and 1 male has a religious attire like cap and beard, and 1 woman has religious attire like hijab. So, and we controlled all the individual characteristics like education, university, major department, CGPA, in leadership experience, work experience, and all other individual characteristics. And also, we also controlled some other potential bias, like source of bias, like for elite bias, we controlled name, like there are some names that indicates candidates come from elite families. So like we controlled we use the general, like common names used in Bangladesh, and we use mailing address from the common areas and other things like appearances, and we check on those like potential source of biases. We select 4 sectors: NGO, corporate, media, and IT for sending resumes. So we send 8 resumes to each job openings, around 3,248 resumes we sent to 406 job openings for a time duration of 10 months. And we recorded the callbacks, like which candidates they are calling for interview or a written test. Here are the mean callbacks based on general high school background and madrasa. As you see in the overall callbacks was like around 10%. Madrasa candidates gets around 8%. Sorry, overall candidates for general high school candidates is around 11%. And which is like 7 to 8% for the candidates with madrasa high school background, which is like 40% difference. But if you look at the male candidates for the male candidates with madrasa high school background, they are getting much lower callbacks. It seems like to get a same level of callbacks, candidates with madrasa high school background has to apply 96% more 96% more application to jobs. 96%. Sorry. Okay, 96% more application they have to send to get the similar level of callbacks, and it is discrimination is higher in the corporate sector. Okay, let me quickly go to my regression results. So in this slide, you see like madrasa candidates are getting lower callbacks in across the industries, and religious candidates with religious attire, with beard or hijab, they are getting lower callbacks in all the sectors except the NGO. NGO seems non-discriminatory, and female candidates are getting higher callbacks from the NGO, so they have a preference there. And these are coefficient. Also, we didn't get any overall gender discrimination. If you see, except the NGO, they are preferring women, female candidates. There is no overall gender discrimination. However, I segregated the jobs in low-paid and high-paid jobs, and I found that female candidates are getting higher callbacks from the low-paid jobs. So there's some sort of discrimination, and like in 8 arms of the candidates, 8 treatments. So you see, NGOs are more or less non-discriminatory, but male candidates are facing higher discrimination compared to the female candidates, with any signals of religiosity. So in conclusion, it is evident that the differential treatment exists in Bangladeshi labor market, and madrasa background candidates receiving fewer callbacks across industries. Discrimination based on attire is highest in corporate and media sector. Women receive higher callbacks in low-paid jobs and jobs that requires high client interactions. And women are getting much lower callbacks from the media industry, which is pretty counterintuitive. Male candidates with signals of religiosity experience highest discrimination than their counterpart. So in implication, this study might help policymakers in designing anti-discriminatory policies. And for future research, so we are not sure like what is the source of this discrimination. In theory, there are like two types of discrimination: prejudice-based and statistical. But from this study, you cannot like ensure which kind of discrimination is this, but it just ensured that evident that discrimination exists, but it requires further study to know what kind of discrimination is this. Thank you.
Okay, let's open the floor to questions. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Sibbir, like, how did you send those applications, like the CVs, to any job platform?
We use for the job searching, we use BD Jobs, Prathama Jobs. Those are like online job platform in Bangladesh, and also some social media groups. But we send resumes mainly through email, except few that requires like physical mail.
Can I
Thank you. Yeah, please, please go ahead.
Go ahead. In the back, yes.
Madhav.
Hi, Sibbir. It was an excellent presentation and super, interesting. So my question is that, there in some jobs it is specified that females are encouraged to apply, and in some there are also mentioned about some qualifications or something like that. For example, you have to have experience in a particular field or something like that. So as you mentioned that you customize the CVs before you sending them, but when you model the regressions, how did you control them?
So thank you for asking this question. It's a very important one. So those questions, like if any jobs particularly encourages women, or like there are some preferences for women and there are some preferences for men too, like for night duties jobs. So we actually exclude those jobs. Like we found around 150 jobs like this, and we didn't apply to those jobs. We only apply to those jobs that are like open to everyone and open for college graduates.
Also, just complement the previous one, is that in the other papers, those I have seen on the similar topic, they also include the color of the applicant, the skin color of the applicant, whether fair or non-fair. Did you also include that in the contrast, like whether the applicant is fair or dark color?
So since we use photographs, so we try to control that so that there is no bias based on appearances. We try to use all those 8 photos pretty similar, like average Bangladeshi people, not dark or not fair or like those. So all 8 photos are pretty common photos. Yeah, common standard.
Yes, I think you were first. Go ahead.
Super interesting. I wonder, what is the comparison group in your study? So you have 4 treatment arms, right?
Technically, it's 8. So in the second model, so there are 3. So we randomize in 3 levels. First one is high school, and then gender, and then attire. So 3-level randomization. In combination, there are 8 groups. Right. So in first model, I just compare like considering high school dummy, attire dummy, and gender dummy. But in the second model, I separated 8 groups and control the.
So what is the reference like?
The reference one is a male candidate with general high school background with no religious symbol like beard or cap.
Yeah, you did mention that in Bangladesh, photo is a requirement. Is it a legal requirement or is a
photo? I'm not sure. It's a like tradition. Probably there are some some job circulars mentioned it like you have to put your photo there. It's probably to like control any kind of fraud or something maybe. But it's a tradition that resumes have photo.
The reason I'm asking is because what if you had a reference group without any photo?
Okay, that could be another study, but I believe you have to have a photo for most of the jobs in Bangladesh.
Okay, we have 1 minute. Yes, go ahead.
Please, Mugdha.
I mean, the point that you ended, right? So I think it is extremely important that we understand whether it's a taste-based discrimination or it's a statistical discrimination, because we know statistical discrimination could happen, right? When the manager doesn't have the perfect foresight about the people who are applying. And I'm not sure necessarily that is bad in the context of Bangladesh. Second is that if it is taste-based, then it is going to be a good finding, right? And this seminal paper by Bertrand and Mulania, and then so many papers followed, right? So I think rather than focusing on Bangladesh aspect, if you could show something on that huge literature of taste-based discrimination, how you're adding to it, that would be really fantastic.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Can I just add in 30 seconds? So, I have seen papers where they have showed in the context of Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India that, people who have madrasa background, they had, on an average, their mean performance was lower than the, general background. There's one paper by, Nia Jasadullah as well. So what I was, just to, compliment Mugdha's point is that if the bias that you have seen, it would be interesting, whether it is coming from the perception, like whether it is not based on the outlook or but based on the perception that, okay, this guy may be from madrasa and maybe the asymmetry of information.
Yeah, that's an important point. Yeah, I look at Nia Jasadullah's work. So in our experiment, we controlled all the individual characteristics. So like in terms of language skill, academic achievement, leadership skill, experience. So all those are, for our candidates, all those are similar, pretty similar, except their high school background or gender or religious preferences. So we controlled that.
Okay, let's wrap up. And the last but not least, go ahead.
Thank you.
Grand finale, yes, Mr. Towhid Iqram Mahmood, Anti-Sweatshop Activism and the Safety-Employment Tradeoff, Evidence from Bangladesh's Rana Plaza Disaster.
I can't find it. Where should it?
It should be open here.
Oh, okay. Cool.
All right. Very last session. Everybody's energy is super down, but I'll try my level best to charge it up. So thank you so much for keeping your heads up till now. So today I'm going to talk about this paper on anti-sweatshop activism and the safety-employment trade-off. The good news is that this paper is published last month in Journal of Economic Behavior and Organization. The awesome news is that I am going to work more on sweatshops in the future. So any sort of feedback, any sort of criticism is more than welcome. So before I talk about the research question, the one thing we need to understand is that what are sweatshops? Sweatshops are the places where people work under horrible conditions with very low pay. And who are the anti-sweatshop activists? The activists are the ones who are who work on increasing the wages for the workers and safety concerns for the workers, right? So what we were asking in this paper is that does the anti-sweatshop activism post-Rana Plaza disaster has any impact on the employment and farm growth in the wearing apparel industry in Bangladesh, right? Okay, so in 2013, as we all know, that the Rana Plaza collapsed, and then about 1,100 people died and about 2,500 people, workers were injured, right? And this led to the creation of Accord and Alliance, who are private regulatory bodies supported by the multinational brands who buy from Bangladesh, buy from the government sector of Bangladesh. And also the other involving party was the sourcing factories who had to implement these safety concerns. So Accord
Accord and Alliance were working as regulatory bodies who will do audits to check if the factories are maintaining the safety concerns or not. And multinationals are sort of funding these audits to maintain the safety concerns in them. And if some factory is not following that sort of compliance, then the multinationals will not buy from those factories, right? So that was the basic setup, right? So what we are trying to evaluate over here in this paper is that whether this sort of safety regulation, does it have any sort of impact on employment and firm growth in Bangladesh, right? Now, there are literature on how like meeting the anti-sweatshop activism agendas can have an impact in employment, specifically from early 90s Indonesia, where the minimum wage was raised because of the earlier anti-sweatshop activism, and that decreased the employment in the Indonesian wearing apparel industry by about sort of kind of 30%, right? So similarly, we are trying to figure out whether that sort of like this sort of activism in case of Bangladesh, does it have any sort of impact in the employment and firm growth in Bangladesh, right? All right, so the methodology that we are following over here is the synthetic control method. It is really popular to evaluate any single treated units, to evaluate the impact on single treated units. Like in this case, Bangladesh is the only country that is having that sort of intervention, like the Accord and Alliance coming up right after Rana Plaza over there, right? So the basic idea over here is to construct a counterfactual Bangladesh to evaluate the impact of the reaction to the Rana Plaza disaster, right? And so the main important part in constructing a synthetic control is to choose your donor pool, right? So you will make a synthetic Bangladesh based on your donor pool. The donor pools will provide you with certain percentage of weights from which you'll like construct the synthetic control, right? And then to construct that, you need similar sort of donor countries or donor units compared to the treated unit, right? So here, what we have done is we have carefully chosen countries which has similar geography as Bangladesh, level of development, size of garment export sector, and history of protester sweatshops, right? So Powell and Scarbeck and Powell, they record the protester sweatshops all around the world starting from 1995 to 2010. From there, we can like get the list of countries that have protester sweatshops in them, right? So that restricted our donor pool to 12 countries for the employment model because we're evaluating the employment growth, and 11 countries for farm model to avoid overfitting, right? So we'll construct two separate synthetic controls, one for the employment model, one for the farm model, right? So here is a list of the countries, the donor pool countries, and they're divided into like the criteria that we followed to select them, right? So, and then we have a little bit of different set of countries for two models because of data limitation. So as I said, for employment model, we have like 12 countries, donor countries, and for farm model, we have 11 countries, right? All right, moving on. So constructing a synthetic Bangladesh specifically for the wearing apparel industry is a little bit harder because Bangladesh is an outlier in terms of employment into the wearing apparel industry and in terms of like farms. So the closest one in terms of employment to Bangladesh was China. And in terms of number of farms was, I guess, India. Yeah. So what we did was like, first we were trying to follow the regular synthetic control methodology, but it was not giving us with a good pretreatment fit. Then we consulted Furman and Pinto, who suggested that we can normalize the data so that we can have a better pretreatment fit, which also gives us the opportunity to see the impact at the percentage change level, right? So what we did was we normalized the outcome data to be equal to 1 in the year 2013. This is also called demeaning the data so that we can have a better pretreatment fit. Because if you think from this perspective that if you want to compare the intervention, then pretreatment, there should not be any sort of diversion or differences between the synthetic unit and the treated unit, right? All right. So we constructed the synthetic control with some pretreatment outcome variables, which is really common in synthetic control methodology. That's what also makes sure that there's not much divergence pretreatment. And then we use some indicator variables as well so that we can capture the same sort of whether the donor countries have the best possible donor country that has, or the countries that have similar attributes as the treated country, which is Bangladesh, right? And then we also constructed the synthetic control with only pretreatment outcome, which is also popularized by Furman in his recent literature, where they show that it can be a way of like robustness checks as well, right? All right. So talking about the inference, so what we did was we constructed the followed the same sort of methodology to construct synthetic controls for each of the donor countries, and then saw post-intervention, like after 2013, whether they have like a sort of deviation like Bangladesh. So if they did not have sort of similar sort of deviation like Bangladesh, then we can say that they are not, so the intervention that we are checking is in the proper direction, so we can have draw a conclusion based on our experiment, right? And then like the p-value in this context is that the percentage of donor countries that have higher deviation post 2013 than Bangladesh or not. So that means we all know that the lower number of p-value means good. That means that like the effect was statistically significant, right? All right, quickly moving on to the identification. So another thing that we have to make sure over here is that the treatment that we are evaluating over here is solely because of the reaction to the Rana Plaza disaster, right? So one of the reaction of the multinationals is that they got a lot of PR pressure, and then what the sort of things that they had to deal with was to show the world that they are caring about that situation and join in with Accord and Alliance so that the safety concerns were met in those factories. Another option for them was to move to like higher productivity countries where they have to pay a little bit more to get the same sort of output from there. But either way, these sort of reactions based on this sort of regulatory pressure go into the same direction, right? And the costs of production is going up and demand for garment produced in Bangladesh is going down, right? And then the other concern that we have to make sure is that there's no stable unit treatment value assumption violation. That means there's none of the donor pool countries got similar sort of treatment. As far as we know, there is no Accord and Alliance in any of the donor pool countries, right? So data for employment and farms come from INSTAT2, which comes from United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Data for Bangladesh was not available in that data set, so we had to collect it from Bangladesh Bank, right? And for the employment model, we're evaluating from 2001 to 2017. For the firms model, we are evaluating it from 2005 to 2016. And indicator variables, all of them come from the Penn World Table. Quickly going to the results, right? So following that methodology, our synthetic Bangladesh for the employment model is constructed of 92.5% Vietnam and 7.5% Kazakhstan, right? And as I will show you in this picture is that pre-treatment, 2013 is the treatment year when the Rana Plaza collapsed, and there was a lot of regulatory pressure right after it. Before that, you can see that there is not much deviation between Bangladesh and the synthetic Bangladesh, right? That means that pre-treatment, they're very close. What I want to show you that post-treatment or post-2013, because of that sort of regulatory pressure and the sort of things that the farms had to follow, the growth in Bangladesh's employment in the wearing apparel industry is like negative, right? So in this picture, you can see that had there not been any sort of regulatory pressure, the growth would have been much higher than it stagnated at that period from 2013 to 2017. And the effect is by 2017, there was about 29% less people employed in the wearing apparel industry in Bangladesh. And our firm model that was constructed of Singapore, in India, Armenia, Mongolia, and Indonesia shows a similar sort of results. The number of farms actually went down post-2013. Had there not been any sort of regulatory pressure, it would have increased much higher, right? And by 2016, it was about 33% less than its counterfactual that we are seeing. All right, So findings is that there's strong evidence that reaction to multinational brands to the Rana Plaza disaster resulted in a large statistically significant decrease in employment and firms in Bangladesh, and is also robust to different robustness checks that we have done with, as I mentioned before. And so the conclusion that we draw in our paper is that there is, so in last 10 years, as we talked about, last 10 years, there was no sort of disasters in the wearing apparel industry in Bangladesh. But as we show over here that about relatively lesser people were getting employed and there was lesser amount of firms, and the development in the wearing apparel industry was sort of like stagnated. So what we suggest is that like the safety and working conditions improve as the process of development, as development goes up and increases, so that we should be concerned more about regulating this sort of booming industries in countries like Bangladesh. Thank you so much.
I'll take the liberty of asking the first question. So when you say the number of firms decrease, do you think it's well, there are, I guess, two questions. Do you think it's entry margin decrease, exit margin increase, or do you think there's a shift from smaller but more firms to larger but fewer firms because of the safety concern, and I guess bigger firms have more safety?
Right, exactly. So the thing that we argue about is that the cost is increasing, right, either way, because the factories are not getting funded by the multinationals. The Accord and Alliance is getting funded by the multinationals, right? So you as a, like, say, for example, if you are a factory owner, you have to bear the cost of, you know, like making sure that the safeties are, like, safety concerns are met. So for the, like these smaller firms, the cost is relatively higher compared to the bigger firms, right? And that's what actually we see over here, that like the ones that cannot meet that sort of requirement, they will like exit the market.
Yes, go ahead, Salim.
Towhid, I have a lot of questions, but we may
Sure.
discuss those things later.
Yes, sir.
One thing is that I'm just, posing this question. Maybe you can may respond or respond later.
Mhm.
Your synthetic control, this model, especially when it comes to employment, Bangladesh is actually Vietnam. If 92.7%
Exactly.
is the weight is from Vietnam, then
Exactly.
only two countries, and it's Vietnam is 92.7. So
Right.
I have a bit of issue there. I think
Right.
you need to check
Absolutely.
that too. Second one is that how did you get the employment data of ready-made garment apparel sector? Year-wise data, the actual data. What is the source of this data?
So the Bangladesh Bank, they have this ready-made garments section in their research division. So they release the quarterly data. I think it was the last time they published it was somewhere around like 2019 or 2000. I'm not sure when, but like we had to limit it to 2017 because like the other data set, that the UN-DO data set was till 2017. But they had yearly data for the number of people employed in the ready-made garment sector.
But this is very interesting because only data, what we heard about the ready-made garments is only available through the Bangladesh Garments Exporters and Manufacturers Association.
Right. So so Bangladesh Bank gets their data from BGMEA.
Okay. So that's the point I was really going to make.
Okay.
If you look at the Bangladesh, the BGME's data, is actually there is no change in the data. They're reporting that 4 million
right.
employment.
Right. Exactly.
So that's why I'm requesting to check that too.
Right.
And my final point is about, I think when you, no, I just forgot it.
Okay. So can I respond to your first point?
Yeah.
So what we did was, so since you raised this question and also the reviewers raised this question that why is Vietnam 92%? I can, so I think it's not coming up over here, but if you go into the, like the criteria that we select the donor pool countries on, if you look at Vietnam, it checks up almost every point that is possible to be met, right? That's the shorter answer to your question. But the much longer one is that we dropped Vietnam actually from the donor pools and then rerun the whole thing to construct the synthetic control. We get similar results with I think India then gets like higher, like somewhere around like 90% of the weight, but like relatively less statistical significance. So one of the biggest debates about synthetic control is that like everybody talks about like dropping the one which has the highest weight, but then if it meets all your criteria, then why would you drop a country that has the highest weight, right? And also if you go to the employment, like the graph, so this is practically the graph for Vietnam. So if I like just plot it, and we also like in the final version of the paper, there is just a graph for Vietnam's employment, and it's like very much like these are the like growth perspective of the employment, and it's pretty much same to Bangladesh. And right after like 2013, you can see that the growth in the employment was higher for Vietnam compared to what is for Bangladesh.
So here the actual thick line is the actual data.
Actual data for Bangladesh. Yeah.
Yes, so that's what I was really pointing out.
Yes.
It's flat. And
yes.
That's been reported. The same
right.
data.
So I talked to somebody from BGME as well to make sure that the data is correct, because like it's really important to make sure that your data is correct. Otherwise, like it's a no-no, right? So what they said is that like there was fluctuations in employment, but it stayed at somewhere around that 4 million level for the whole period till 2017.
I want to just give a very quick answer to Joy's question about which factories got shut down, especially after Rana Plaza. Probably Towhid can mention that too. There was a large number of factories which are subcontracting firms.
Yes, exactly.
And those were after accord and alliances. They took, took this initiative. Most of the subcontracting firms were closed down.
Yes. I just wanted to give her a like shorter answer because of time. Yeah, go ahead. Oh.
Lots of interest. I think your hands were up.
Okay.
First. Yeah.
Hi, Towhid. Thank you so much for the nice, excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Point I want to make is that although the employment in the RMG sector didn't change over time, but the output went up, really up.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw papers. I saw one work from Razak sir, and he argued that output per worker has increased over this time. So
Okay.
it's the productivity of the worker that has gone up, and they argued that the automation in the RMG sector, it happened really fast over the past 1 decade or so.
Right.
So they showed actually the automation started even before the Rana Plaza. So something around from after around 2009 and 2010. So the point I want to make is that so perhaps the employment, the gap we are seeing there's a lot role played by automation.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, one argument that I can think of, or like that we talked about in the paper, is that you can see the sharp decline in like number of firms. Like if we just like leave the employment part away, you can see that like there is a sharp decline in the number of firms right after that incident, right? So if automation, like you can like, I will not argue that like because of automations, there's a lot of firms like shut down right after 2013 because that's the year of intervention. And similar thing for the employment model as well, that like, so if it started from 2010 or 2009, then it would have like, it should have like declined or started declining before 2013, right? So that could be, and then our argument as well is that like the development in general of the safety concerns, and if you talk about wages, is that it will eventually grow with the period of time when the sector gets developed, and also in the country when there is more diverse fields, because now the workers will have more bargaining power if the country is more developed, or the sector in general is more developed, so that they can choose from different places where they can work at. So clearly the intervention of Accord and Alliance is not helping them do that.
More questions. Wow. Okay. I'll take last two.
Yeah, thank you very much for wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
So basically, after collapse of Rana Plaza, the compliant factory, number of compliant factory increased significantly.
Yep.
And also LEED certified factories also increased. More than 200 factories, they got certification, and around 500 they are in place in the process. So that's also important. But on the other hand, if you look at the minimum wage, is if you look at the poverty line income in Bangladesh, and minimum wage is almost half of the poverty line income. So have you looked at this also, the minimum wage issues?
It's a really good point, right? So there are other studies, like specifically the book that I was talking about, Powell 2014, where they compare the wages of the sweatshop workers with the national averages. And in most of the cases, and for most of the countries, it's sort of kind of close to the national average. And also they talk about the alternatives that are available to the workers, right? So what is the basic alternative available to a worker in a random country, or like a generally a country like Bangladesh, right? Either they can work in alternatives like agriculture, where most of the people work, or like the other alternative that they have will probably not pay them as much as the sweatshops are paying them, right? So that's another of the argument that's in place over there, that the minimum wage concern, that whether the minimum wage should be raised or not. But like people, in general, when criticizing sweatshops, people like forget about comparing it to the alternatives, what they are getting.
Okay, I think we still have a lot to discuss. We can do that outside, but
okay.
Sorry about that. But before you go, I just want to take the chance to thank everybody for staying. I also want to take the chance to promote a little bit our own network, which you can see printed on the program. It's called South Asia Economic Policy Network. It's housed under the Chief Economist office. Some of you probably get email from us every now and then. We organize the conferences. We send out call for paper, call for participation, and also we do twice a year opinion survey, and we take the survey and feature that in our World Bank publication. So those are like, mostly macroeconomic questions, but we also have micro structural economic questions to see what people in the region think. So if you're interested, scan the QR or find us online. There's an email that you can email to join the network. So thank you so much, Salim, for giving me the platform to promote.
No, thank you so much. And on behalf of SANEM and all of us, I think we must thank World Bank, and of course, Zoe, you also, from the very beginning, the way you helped us. Thank you. I think that's it. I think in my personal experiences says that I actually attended the longest day of a conference. Thank you. And thanks, Rip.